Hi, I'm Alan Ross. I'm the managing editor of APC Media. This is DISTRIBUTECH International 2024 Interviews with Thought Leaders. Enjoy. Well, my next guests are Garret Fitzgerald and Jared Leader. They are with SEPA, and SEPA is an organization that I've kind of followed along, but I've never had an opportunity to talk to anybody from there. But before we get into SEPA and get into what we're really going to talk about, tell me a little bit about yourself, how you got in the industry and how you got with SEPA.
Yeah, for sure, and we're excited to be here, and thanks for the opportunity. So as you said, I'm Garret Fitzgerald, and I'm the Senior Director of Transportation at SEPA. I got into the industry about 15 years ago, started in academia with the solar decathlon, and really understood that this was an opportunity of the lifetime, and the market was kind of primed with potential. Went to grad school, actually ended up with a PhD looking at carbon sequestration. When I got out of that, I realized still pretty nascent technology, maybe not going to be talked about for a decade or more.
But you're kind of set up for the future now, right?
Yeah. And then I transitioned and I started focusing on energy storage and electric vehicles. Spent about a decade at Rocky Mountain Institute looking at policy, market, economic drivers for those technologies. And that set me up really well for when I joined SEPA about 3 years ago.
Okay.
And now at SEPA, I oversee all of our work focused on transportation electrification, working with utilities, vendors, et cetera, sort of navigate this transition that we'll get into in a little bit, but really excited.
Excellent, yes. And you, Jared?
So similarly to Garret, I came into this industry without any utility or energy experience. I'm an engineer, or in a
What
past
kind
life,
of an engineer?
Civil and environmental,
Okay.
by training but not practice. And I worked at a environmental engineering firm for about 5 years and got involved with more energy projects. And more and more I saw municipalities transitioning from natural gas to biofuel to renewable fuel. I saw a lot of landfills turning their brownfield into solar. And I saw this great opportunity, and I really wanted to get into this market. I went back to school. I went to Johns Hopkins and got a master's in energy. So I started really focusing in on energy. I started with SEPA about 7 years ago, and it was right after Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico.
Oh yeah. We're still suffering from that aftermath.
We are. And Con Ed, the utility, sent a bunch of folks down. Navigant sent folks down. Our CEO at the time was close with Gil Quinnes, who was the CEO of NYPA, New York Power Authority. But long story short, we developed a consortium with several different stakeholders and worked in Puerto Rico for about 5 months to just assess the damage. They sent engineers down because I had this experience in a past life with FEMA and municipalities and clean energy. I got, fortunately I was put on that project. And ever since at SEPA, I've been focusing on the resilience work and microgrids and how localized generation and storage can provide a benefit. But like you said, there's still a lot of work to be done. And I think that's what's so exciting about working at SEPA.
And we're going to get into that. There's still a lot of work to be done, but that's the second part of this thing. First part of this thing, in the last 5 years, we have seen more change than we've seen in 100 in the power industry. And I say that not utility, but the power industry, because it's bigger than just the utilities. I like the hockey stick, and there's an inflection point, and we're just now beginning to see the change. We all think that it's going to be great change. But as you look at how did we get to here? Where is here? Where do you think we are in this transition of the power industry? We're going to start with you.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna focus a little bit on transportation because that's my area. And I think we are here, being the wave of electric transportation is just upon us. We're sort of rising up, and that's probably what I would say is the biggest trend I've seen in the past 5 years. So I've been in this space, like I said, 15 years. About a decade ago, I started working with utilities, advising them EVs are coming. They're going to be a great opportunity for load growth, also a flexible load. And for about 5 years, everyone said, well, we don't see them. They're not here. We'll believe you when they're here. And over the past 5 years, it's switched, and they're here.
And now they're saying, hurry up, hurry up.
Well, no, now they're saying, all right, how are we going to be able to meet this demand at the speed that the vehicles are coming, that the customers are demanding power? And another shift that you've seen is a lot of programs 4, 5, 6 years ago were trying to incent customers to adopt EVs.
Right.
And now it's really trying to ensure that we can provide the infrastructure for those EVs and not actually get in the way of how fast this transition is happening. It's driven in part by policy and by economics, and really by a demonstrated shift in the auto OEMs putting big money into this. So I think that's what has driven that wave to start coming. We're seeing it at a global scale. We saw it in China, we're seeing it in Europe, and now in the US. It's right in our face.
I'm going to come back to something that you mentioned, because I think infrastructure may be the rate limiting factor as to how quickly we adopt it. I won't rent an electric car anymore because I don't want to worry about how I'm going to get a charge on it.
Right.
And that was in California. Imagine how I am in Idaho, right? So we're going to talk about infrastructure, which comes first, that kind of thing. But let's talk about the same thing. How did we get to where we are, especially from the brownfield to the solar to the, I assume we're taking now gas out of the brownfield and using, there's a lot of things going on.
I will focus more on the policy and the drivers of climate change, because I think that's the story that has led me to where I am. But I think more and more corporations and utilities are being driven by policymakers to make sustainability goals. And whether it's a municipality on a landfill, or if it's a utility that has these lofty, decarbonize by 2050 or even 2030 in some cases. So I think a lot of that is driven by the focus around climate change. And even at SEPA, we've started as a solar organization. Now we're all of the above on the mission. So 10 years ago, people were talking less about climate change. Now it's more of an accepted fact. And that has led to the increase of natural disasters and the intensity and the severity of storms. And that has a real lasting impact on the power grid. And utilities and customers have felt that over the past couple of years. I think last year it was over $1 billion of damages from natural hazards. And a lot of that's coming down to the utility sector and customer. And so it's not just a calculus for the utilities to serve reliable, affordable, and safe power. Now it's resilient. And just in the past 6 months, there's been several regulatory commissions that have come out and required utilities to include resilience. But I think that's all driven by, the fact that there's been a lot of damage on the system, and the electric grid is just not built to handle high-speed winds and ice storms. So I think how we got here, we're at a turning point of building out the infrastructure. And I know we're going to talk a little bit more about that, but building out the infrastructure that's hardened and reliable and resilient against natural disasters, because I don't think the propensity and the intensity of storms is going to change. It's only going to get worse, and we just have to build in a way that can be built against that. And I think that starts with the distribution system, goes into the transmission system, and ultimately how we're generating power.
Isn't it funny that you started with the distributions and then transmission? In the old days, it was very easy, right? We generated power, and we did it usually by bulk generation. We stepped it down through the transmission, and then we distributed it. Now we've got chaos at the distribution end, because you got prosumers and wind and solar and everybody driving around with a battery. Yeah, exactly. And you have chaos at the generation side, because the same thing. It's almost like, and I use the word chaos, and some people in the industry don't like it. For those that are having to manage that, it is chaos. How do we manage a grid in such flux? Let's start with the electrification of transportation, because you're creating most of the problem, you guys.
Yeah, it's an opportunity. But before we get there, I want to touch on one thing. Hearing both of us speak about the last question, we sort of forgot to say we are where we are because the market is driving us here and the economics are here. So we're seeing this growth and we're seeing investment in solar and wind because it is one of the cheaper sources of generation. And so now we have to adapt to that, and it's compounded by the complexity of weather, et cetera. So we'll get to the infrastructure. But I just wanted to say that policy has played a role, but I really think the market has taken over, and that's why we're going to see this growth and this transition accelerate. But back to your question, how are we going to take advantage of this opportunity that electric vehicles provide? Well, it starts with data and using data to understand how we're going to evolve from where we are today to where we'll be, let's say, at 2030. And for me, that means when and where are these electric vehicles going to enter the system, and when and where are they going to charge? And how can we, as the utilities, ensure that we put in place the right mechanisms and programs so that they charge at a location and at a time that makes the best use of our existing infrastructure and allows us to have the time we need to build the infrastructure for future charging. So it's sort of, in theory, it's relatively simple. We need to know where to build, they need to tell us it, and we'll build. In practice, it's much more chaotic, as you will, and each individual fleet customer or residential customer, they don't yet have a plan of when they're going to electrify. And in fact, when they come up with a plan and then they hear it's $2 million to get that upgrade to your system, maybe that changes their plans, right? And maybe they rethink that. And so there's a little bit of iteration. So answer one is data. Answer two is sort of expanding the scope of what we're thinking about and saying, we don't need to just build for fleet A, B, and C. We need to think all of them are eventually going to be electric. And how can we start doing distribution and transmission planning with that longer term load growth in mind, while not overbuilding? So there's a balance. There's a role of the regulators. Long story short, it's complicated, but we got a lot of people working on it.
You know, Garret, you make it sound so reasonable that we will get, but I do believe we will get there. So he's got a when and where. I got one now and here. Okay,
all right.
So now and here.
When I think of now and here, I think of the benefit cost analysis. I've heard it over and over again, even at this conference. Least cost solution. What is the least cost solution? And is it a positive one benefit cost analysis? Well, before we can develop a truer benefit cost analysis, we have to consider things like the cost of carbon or the cost of resilience. If we do not, then we'll just continue down the path that we have. Electric vehicles, to your point, bring a benefit to the community in air pollution and reduction of carbon. If the utilities that are responsible for building the infrastructure aren't able to monetize or quantify the benefits that those can deliver, then it's going to be a hard, the costs is still a big factor and a prohibiting factor at one. Likewise, with things like energy storage in communities that have had power issues or power quality issues, or vulnerable populations that have been impacted by the propensity of storms that I was talking about, there's no value for their loss of load. You can't value a life, or you can't value, you can certainly value a Walmart being down, and they are, and that is one solution that many people here and utilities are working on with key accounts and commercial customers. But until there's a value for resilience that can be monetized or quantified in the whole grand scheme of things with the benefit cost analysis, there's no way for regulators to determine what this new least cost solution is. And if there's no way for regulators to make that decision, then utilities kind of have their hands behind their back.
One more point I want to go on. When we should define least cost, put some boundaries, because if it's least cost today, but we continue down that path, it will be more expensive in 10 years. I mean, I'm thinking again back to EVs. Total cost of ownership, an EV is cheaper to own than a gas vehicle. It may be more expensive up front. Right. You get these savings down the line. It's a little different when we're talking about the energy system, but it's, are we future-proofing this? Because we do know we have to get to a point where we have much higher renewables and storage. There's going to be a cost to doing that transition. And so I don't think we should look so close and focused on the very least simplest solution without recognizing we have to get this transition underway, and it might cost a little bit more. In the end, we'll have a cheaper system, a more reliable system.
So you mentioned something that I'm going to go to for our final for the future, and you used the word policy. Okay. In the United States, we have 50 state regulators that basically say to a utility, tell us what you want to spend money on, buying assets. That's what it's been, right? Physical assets, and we'll give you a rate increase. It's usually not, tell us how you want to harden, make flexible, look at the future, total. That's usually not what those 50 do. We have a national policy, which right now is very favorable to, hey, we're pushing for change. And I agree with you, without that national policy, without a real push for change, and that's just not at the federal level, that's different parts of the federal level. But without that push for change, it would have happened, but it's taken a lot longer. From a policy standpoint, how do we coordinate policy so that we can speak with one voice, have 50 state regulators help? I know you're smiling because you know how hard that is, because you don't want a bunch of political hacks, and I can call it that because in my state, that's what they are, that say, well, tell us what you're going to spend some money on, boy, and we'll give you a rate increase. They're not ratepayers anymore. They're prosumers. It's a completely different world. How do we help federal policy impact state policy and really move this thing forward?
Well, it's going to be hard, but I think it can start with education, right?
Okay.
If we can educate all the regulators of the benefits and the why, they're going to be more inclined to incentivize or enable utilities to do these things.
Right.
And so I think that's the very first. Understand that this is not futuristic technology. This is today's technology that's providing value and benefit today, and customers want it, and it will save money, right? And so if you're meaning to be able to provide a low-cost, reliable power system, then the regulator is there to let you do that. And so, in terms of how do we get federal policy to influence state policy? I don't have a solution. We have policy experts at SEPA. What I would say is, the better we can normalize how each state is doing these, so it's not Ford has to come in and learn, oh, how do I work with these 50 different regulators and these 3,300 different utilities, some of them which aren't regulated at all because they're a muni or co-op. So I don't have a solution for that, but that is what needs to happen, more normalized approach. So all the vendors here in this building don't have to figure it out 3,300 different times.
I'm with you 100%.
To add on to that, normalize or standardize different, processes. One example, we talked about the integration of distribution and transmission and generation, and it's just way more complex now. It's two-sided, bi-directional. There's way more third-party vendors and third-party players. So in addition to education, I would just say take what some states are doing really, really well and educate other states on what's working.
And what's not working, because we know some.
Right. Because based on what is working in some states, I think there is a lot of lessons to be learned, and we often work in silos and one commission's not really talking to the other commission. But over the past couple of years, there's been a lot more cross-coordination, I would say, between FERC and state commissions. We did work with the DC Public Service Commission. The ex-commissioner, Willie Phillips, is now the FERC commissioner. So it's good to see that type of cross-pollination between state and federal. But I do think that setting up some standardized approaches to how can you get a benefit cost analysis from one state to another. What's the process for a developer coming in and developing projects or interconnecting projects from one state to another? There's certainly states that are way behind. So it's a challenge, but education is huge.
I would say, just to close out that part, don't reward inefficiencies in the system. Don't reward bad actors. And we know what bad actors are, right? They're all the bad things that happen. But there are also bad actors in terms of that. One state that may not be doing it well, and for some reason, because of politics, they may be rewarded as opposed to other states. And there's big state, little state, there's a lot going on there. Last question, both of you, I'm going to start with you on this one. Who is SEPA? And how can we promote SEPA? And what is it that you all are doing? Because you're going to end it on that note, Garret.
Well, SEPA is the Smart Electric Power Alliance. It is a 501c3 non-for-profit membership-based organization that has about 1,100 members, 700 of which are utilities. And our mission is to support the clean energy future. And what that really means, it's changed over the years. While it started as a solar organization, it's expanded. And while solar is still, I think, a big part of the transition, we've expanded into looking at all technologies that will advance the clean energy transition. So we have 5 focus areas. Garret leads transportation, I lead resilience. We also have policy folks, emerging technology, and storage.
You had to think about that one, didn't you?
And what we do, we do education. We have our own conference, which is a co-host with RE Plus and SIA. And but in addition to running events, we are out here facilitating different stakeholder conversations. We're bringing different perspectives to the table so that we can get there to this decarbonized grid in a smart way. And what that means at SEPA is just not at all costs. So often there are cost considerations with this future grid. There are resilience and affordability concerns. So the goal at SEPA is to bring the various minds together to help solve those problems and come up with solutions like frameworks and standardized approaches.
Garret, you get Jared just gave us one. You get the last word.
All right. Well, I think I want to build on that because you heard Jared and I talk about what needs to happen. And you noticed that we talked about education, standardization, bringing folks together. And that is what SEPA does. And we do that at scale. We had 40,000 people at RE+, and we do that all the way down to a small working group that discussed standards of transactive energy, 10 people, and anywhere in between, right? And so I think what we continue to do is bring folks together, listen to the industry, and then try to allow folks to replicate each other. So we have members across all 50 states, utilities, vendors, and they can all learn from each other. That can happen in person, or that can happen through our resources. So if you visit our website, you can find we have a whole library of resources on how to electrify your fleet, how to deal with vehicle-to-grid technologies, how to design and build a microgrid. And these are simplifications of the resources, but under every focus area that Jared mentioned, you can find some resources. So that's what I would say is, taking what he said is actual events, actual resources. We offer consulting and advisory services, and we are here to partner and we're here to help you. So if you want to learn more, visit us.
Okay. That's why we're here, is to help you get that message out there. Garret, thank you so much. Jared, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Oh yeah, thank you so much.